Let's, without further ado, get a gentleman in here who has his own website. I've had him on in the past. He is the nephew of a former great wrestling promoter out of St. Louis. Those of you who followed wrestling back in the day will know about Wrestling at the Chase. In fact, I was at the Chase last week up in St. Louis, Missouri, and Sam Muchnick, his uncle, was the promoter there in St. Louis, providing us with some great NWA action back in the day. But Irvin Muchnick now joins us, and this guy's got a real heart for what's going on right now with NFL athletes as it relates to the concussion issue. And he's done a lot of work on this, spoken in a lot of panels, and he's going to give you some food for thought today, as the great Don Dare once said. Irvin Muchnick, good afternoon to you, sir, and welcome to our program.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you. It's good to be back under grim circumstances, of course, which are the only ones that I get invited for.
Well, you know, and here's the thing about what happened yesterday with Junior Seau. I don't want to jump the gun. I don't know whether this was related to concussions or whether he was having financial troubles or whether he was just battling depression that wasn't related to plaque on the brain and dementia and all that stuff. I have no idea. What I do know, though, what I do know is whether or not the Seau situation was related to that, NFL football has a real problem, and that's the reason why the league is taking the hardline stance on the Saints the way they are. They know they have a problem, Irv. Do you agree?
Well, I do, but let's jump into my slightly different perspective on this, if we can. Yeah, there are a million stories in the Naked City, and we don't know all the facts on Junior Seau yet. But I'd like to cut past the sanctimony that surrounds these things. I've been covering deaths of pro wrestlers and now pro football players for so long that a kind of, moral fatigue sets in. And I think my wrestling background gave me a great foundation for this stuff because, the wrestlers were the canaries in the coal mine. But let's talk about brain injuries, and let's talk about it in the context of Seau, even though we don't absolutely know yet. I think Josh Levin in Slate put it very well. We're past the point where the football system gets the benefit of the doubt on this stuff. And let's start using these narratives for their public health education value and not just a bunch of mumbling about concussion awareness. Now, if I can go on to make a further point, there are a lot of parallels there is a key parallel between Seau and Dave Duerson, who shot himself in the chest, and a lot of people are remarking on that. Well, the mainstream media have totally missed the boat on the Dave Duerson story. The Duerson story is that he sat on the NFL retirement board and stonewalled the disability claims of dozens or scores of his old colleagues. So instead of the Dave Duerson Safety Fund for high school kids in Muncie, Indiana, I would like to see a United States Labor Department audit of the Burt Bell, Pete Rozelle NFL Retirement Fund for all the claims that were rejected on Dave Duerson's watch. Okay, I'll take a pause now because I'm getting ahead of steam here.
No, continue, because the thing I love about you, Irv, is that you're passionate about what you're saying, and there are going to be people that are going to disagree with you. I mean, you have a hardline stance on football across the board. I do agree. I do believe, and the thing is, your opinion is, I think, both found somewhat in fact, and also you're very passionate about what you're talking about. Here's the thing: there are hundreds, if not thousands, of former NFL football players who are being left out of this modern-day glib and glamour that we see. But even the modern-day glamour is swallowing up the current players, and I think you put it well in your last piece that appears on what site? Herb, help me out here. The
BeyondCron.org, which is an online alternative newspaper in San Francisco. BeyondChron.org.
And your message there is that these guys don't want to be protected from themselves. They don't want to be protected, which is really an odd thing, isn't it?
It sure is. But from a public health standpoint, Tony, I don't think it's relevant. I think what's the missing piece in this national debate is where is our Mothers Against Drunk football? Because what big-time jocks and celebrities do for money and glory is one thing, and the lawyers are going to slug it out in these scores of cases involving more than 1,000 ex-players now. And I have sympathy with the ex-players, but I also know that the NFL has the best lawyers money can buy, and they're going to exploit every contradiction and loophole in everything that any aggrieved ex-athlete is going to say. But that doesn't apply to the rest of us. The question is, why on Friday night are millions of kids ramming their heads together for our uninterrupted junk entertainment at the amateur public high school level? It makes absolutely no sense. If anybody who looks at the evidence and knows that it's better to be safe than to be sorry knows that you should not be sending kids with growing brains into this activity any more than you should be pushing your kids into boxing. And we've got to get our arms around this religion that is football in our country, especially in particular regions of the country, but really everywhere at this point. This $10 billion a year National Football League is foisting the public health costs of traumatic brain injury for a generation of American males onto state-by-state concussion awareness laws in public high school systems that can't possibly afford to prevent concussions, even if they could be prevented. And the NFL is going along on its merry way. And that's the story that the New York Times is not telling. That's the story that all of the hand-wringing over every new NFL death is not telling. That this is not a story about grown men making millions of dollars. This is a story about the declining academic achievement, the reduced workforce productivity, and the increased violent criminal behavior of the American male population, largely as a result of this obsession with football.
Now, what? You're saying that this leads to violent behavior? I mean, do you have anything to back that up?
We have the longitudinal studies to back it up at the level of peer-reviewed scientific literature yet. But I don't have any question that as things move along, that's where this information is going to lead. And there are various ways to process medical and scientific information, and one of the ways is to protect our young people until we know any better. I mean, I'm not calling for banning anything. I'm calling for parents to use a little common sense and not get caught up in this crazy football system, which is a free feeder circuit for the $10 billion a year National Football League.
You know what I had? I have a good friend of mine who played at the University of Tennessee. And he says to me, his son's huge. I'm not going to give his name out because he will take undue, I don't know what the word is, but he'll be scolded by his friends if they find this out, so I'm not going to give him up. But he said, I'm not letting my son play football. I said, why? He said, because he has a real... And eventually he'll have the ability to play professional football. And this guy played professional football. He said, I do not want that life for my son. He said, not only that, I don't want him to... He said, not only that, I don't want him playing high school football. Why? And he says, because at the end of the day, it's just not worth it. You have to give up. Now, the guy sitting next to me...
I agree with that point of view. Let's talk about one other thing, which is that the NFL gave $1 million to the Boston University Center for the Study of Chronic Traumatic Encephalopathy, and it's supposedly a no-strings-attached grant. And yet Dr. Robert Cantu, who knows full well, better than what he says in his public statements, will not talk with a clear voice about the fact that nobody under the age of X, and I don't know what X is, I'm not an expert, but no one should be playing this sport before they reach adulthood and can make choices for themselves. But Dr. Cantu won't bring himself to say those words. Sometimes he creeps up to the edge of it, but then pulls back again. The latest brilliant statement he made was that maybe the NFL is going to have to start banning the drafting of players who have concussion histories in college. Well, I mean, thanks a lot. I wasn't aware that Dr. Cantu was a lawyer and a public relations consultant for the National Football League. I thought he was a public health advocate on the issue of traumatic brain injury for our children.
Harvey, get in here. You vehemently disagree with this gentleman. Go ahead.
Well, my whole thing is, I mean, the players know what they're getting into. It's not like they walk into a football game thinking, oh, I'm not going to get hit. I mean, if they don't want to get hurt and they're really against getting hurt, they should probably go play golf or basketball or whatever. Players play football. They know the risk involved to playing. They know they're going to get hit in the head. They know they might get a concussion. I mean, it's not like they're, oh, I might get hurt. Like, oh, I just got a concussion. No way. It's not like it's a surprise to them.
And our disagreement is what exactly? I mean, is a 6-year-old kid who gets into Pee Wee or Pop Warner football, is he able to process the fact that the accumulation of subconcussive blows over a period of years is going to materially affect his quality of life? I'm not talking about professionals who make millions of dollars. I'm talking about this whole system of football from college to our public high schools down to the Pop Warner and Pee Wee levels that all are inculcated with the same values of our celebrity culture. That's wrong. That's not what sports are about at the amateur level.
Well, let me ask you this. Are there modifications to football that we can make that make the game safer, do you believe? Or are you calling for the abolition of football itself? You think that's the solution?
I am not calling for the abolition of football. I am saying that the markers, legally, medically, financially, educationally, show that this football system is not sustainable for our public high schools. The lawsuits, the cost of state legislation, which really don't solve the problem. All of these things are going to cause the edifice to collapse. I don't know what the tipping point is going to be. I don't know if it's Dave Duerson. I don't know if it's Junior Seau. I suspect the way things work in this country, the tipping point is going to have to be a quarterback murdering his supermodel wife on the 50-yard line at halftime of the Super Bowl before it gets through people's heads. But to answer your question of whether football can be saved from itself, the answer, I think, is clearly no. I don't think there's a helmet technology that is going to do anything other than improve things around the margins. I don't think there are rules changes that are going to change the fact that big athletes are ramming into each other at very high speeds and jostling each other's skulls from one side, brains from one side of their skull to the other, which is what we know is the real root problem of this sport and this activity. So let the pros do it, let the consenting adults do it, but let's get our kids out of this insanely dangerous activity.
How are kids going to get to play pro ball if they never play until they become adults? How does that work?
Well, that's not my problem. That's the NFL's problem, and that's why the NFL is managing it exactly the way they're doing it, with a lot of posturing and fines over bounties and a lot of public service announcements by headhunters like Ray Lewis about how you need to get concussion management and don't go back into a game too soon after you've been hurt and blah, blah, blah. Because the NFL really likes the fact that our country and our television networks are obsessed with their product, and they don't have to pay a dime for their development a kid plays Pee Wee League football and then he's hooked for life. He's a fan sitting there in the stands projecting his fantasies. You're right. The talent pool will shrink considerably if the reforms that I advocate were to take effect. But remember, Tony, there was a time in this country where boxing, a professional boxing match, galvanized the nation in a way that it doesn't now. And it's one of the reasons is that we know that there's this thing that damages people who get involved in boxing. So I think the NFL inevitably is going to gravitate to a lower level in our entertainment spectrum. But I don't know how fast or slow that process is going to happen. I'm just laying bare the facts for people to consider.
At the high school level, Irvin Muchnick joining us today on the program. At the high school level, at the youth level, is there anything empirical that backs up what you're saying about how dangerous this sport is, or are you just saying common sense dictates this?
Well, I think we do know from the research of Dr. Bennett Omalu, who is really the unacknowledged pioneer of this whole field, and from the research of the people in Boston, and from the research in North Carolina and other places, that there is cumulative damage from subconcussive blows as well as catastrophic discrete injuries that by the way, are lowballed in most of the reports. So yes, there is evidence that chronic traumatic encephalopathy and its brethren syndromes result from normal football activity, not just from horrible, extreme, anomalous accidents. And we will achieve another big step when we're at the point where we can start identifying these things in living brains with MRIs and so forth. We're not quite there, but we're getting closer. So one of the problems right now is that we cannot really identify CTE except post-mortem in autopsy. But that will change. But even with that limitation, I think both common sense and growing empirical evidence are showing us that this is insanity for kids.
And here's my thing about, and I'm not as fatalistic as you are and nihilistic toward the game of football as you are, because I think there's some value in it. I think there's value in teamwork. I think there's a lot of things that can be learned. I disagree with this, though. This is a great Division I collegiate level, which we predominantly cover here. It seems to me there's got to be a way to make the games safer. And if the games exist, let's make the games now. I've heard people like, I'm talking about old guard tough guys like me that can come out and say, hey, these helmets, guys, wet. This is wet. These guys have now on their heads. Let's put soft helmets on them. Let's put leather helmets like we used to back in the day. That way, if I'm sticking my head there and I'm going to steer somebody, it's going to hurt me. It's going to hurt the person I'm steering. And that, Herb, where are you on what I would call more realistic type reforms? Do you think that's a good idea? Is there anything else you'd like to see done besides the nuclear option that you're talking about?
Right. Well, you raised, first of all, we're cutting out a little bit, so I hope you can hear me okay. I'm having a little difficulty with you, Tony. But I did get the gist of what you're saying, and I think you raise a perspective that is held by a lot of people. I want to start by saying that I have been a football fan. I don't like the sanctimony over Dave Duerson or Junior Seau or whoever. I also don't like the little ritual where you have to present your bona fides and say that you really are a positive guy, but you feel you have to do this stuff. But I'll bow to that ritual if I have to, because I attended almost every St. Louis football Cardinal home game in the 1960s when I was a kid, and I watched the stuff on television like most everybody else does today. So I indulge in this guilty pleasure. But I am telling you honestly, and I'm not proposing any nuclear options besides people's choices, and I'm trying to inform America's parents about this stuff because they're so enraptured by the football religion that they're not looking at the facts. But to answer your question, if there are measures that can save football from itself, I think the answer is clearly no. I don't think there are rule changes. I don't think there are equipment changes that are going to do anything other than improve things around the margins. And the real problem with helmets is the problem that they had that we see in boxing with the gloves, which is that paradoxically, bare knuckles fighting was safer than the product that grew up in the modern era. It doesn't look as bad now because you don't have these, the cuts and the gross things that we used to see in the 19th century. But the glove protects the hand that hits. It doesn't protect the head that gets hit. And so it is with helmets. And I fear that any change in technology short of eliminating helmets altogether, which is a completely different game. It's the game of rugby, essentially. Any reform short of that is going to be doomed. And that's my point of view, and I think it's the point of view of a lot of serious scientific people. And I think fans, sponsors, and most especially parents should realize that.
Yeah, they're hating on you right now online, Irv, as you know. But here's the thing, and you're going to get hated on, and you're a big boy, you can take it. And I do vehemently disagree with you in certain circles, but at the professional level, they've got to get their hands around this. And to some degree, what they're doing right now is window dressing with the whole deal with the Saints. If there was no court case, we would not see the NFL prosecuting the Saints the way they are. I think everybody could probably, even the shills on ESPN, the Mortensons and these people who make hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, covering and shilling for the game. That's what those guys do. Those guys are arms of the league. But away from that for a second, what about the WWE? After the deal with Chris Benoit and Nancy and that tragedy down in suburban Atlanta, is wrestling, in your mind, getting better right now?
No, I don't think wrestling can really get better as long as one monopoly essentially controls the industry and writes the rules, and as long as there's no meaningful regulation of the occupational health and safety standards. On the subject of wrestling, I know you saw this on Twitter yourself yesterday, Tony. It's been going around that 8 members of the San Diego Chargers 1994-95 Super Bowl team, culminating in Seau yesterday, 8 members of that team have died before their time, as have 8 wrestlers who participated in the 1994 WrestleMania. Actually, I think that's wrong. I think it's only 7. But there's a 1991 WrestleMania where I don't remember the number, where it's really large. But anyway, the point is, these are parallel phenomena. And those of us who have a background in the so-called fake sport of wrestling are really well equipped to analyze this situation in football and legitimate sports because the DNA, the algorithm are identical. But what was your question? I kind of rambled there.
No,
is wrestling better? No, I don't think so. And I think I think that there is a system of drug testing, and there is a concussion management system, which, by the way, is run in the WWE by Dr. Joseph Maroon, their so-called medical director, who is also the team neurologist for the Pittsburgh Steelers and one of the biggest serial liars in the NFL concussion saga. And he's the guy who is one of the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center physicians who own a for-profit company, Impact Applications, which is being foisted on America's high schools at great cost.
Irv, I really appreciate it. Where can folks find your work if they deem to do so online?
My website is concussioninc.net. That's CONCUSSIONINC.net, and I really appreciate this forum, Tony. Always great to talk to you.
Irv, it's always a pleasure, and I'm sorry I'm cutting in and out. I'm told I'm strobing today. I'm trying to get the Hendrix at Monterey effect, but I do thank you.
Okay, till next time.
All right, brother. Have a good one. Irvin Muchnick. I'm not sure I agree with a word he said there, other than at the pro level, they better figure something out. But there's definitely mounting evidence that brain injuries in that sport, and many of these guys are sustaining brain injuries when they're young, and Harvey, coaches can watch for that. And I'm just going to say this, and some of you guys know who I'm talking to, some of you don't, as you hear every third word I say. At the youth level, I don't think a lot of times these coaches are concerned with protecting people. Now, I'm going to talk about some of the stuff I see in this travel baseball, this weekend baseball. I've seen these bird brain guys throw pitchers out there and let them throw 250, 300 pitches in a weekend, okay? That's not doing anybody any good. You're winning a damn trophy, and you're a damn idiot, okay? Now, I want your thoughts on protecting people.
Did that guy say that kids need to stop playing football in high schoolers and they just need to play college football? Or they just need to play pro football? Like, that's the only tackle football allowed? I think he said that. Did he say that?
These freaking baseball coaches that let kids throw...
Answer my question.
...ought to have one of the Gracie boys put them in an arm bar. I want somebody to give me the